Hi everybody and welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Form's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's coming up in this week's edition of Out of the Gate. We've got graded stakes action throughout North America to cover. DRF handicappers Matt Bernier, Mike Beer and I will analyze the Grade 1 Woodbine Mile, the Grade 2 Canadian Stakes, the Grade 2 Sands Point Stakes. DRF's Marcus Hirsch will analyze the foreign invaders for such major races as the Woodbine Mile and the Grade 1 Northern Dancer at Woodbine. Nicole Russo's Pedigree Pick segment focuses on the two graded stakes races for 2-year-olds at Churchill Downs. JK's Play of the Day, there is going to be a gigantic pool in the mandatory payout Super High 5 on the closing race at Woodbine on Saturday. Craig Milkowski's Timeform U.S. Spotlight, the Locust Grove Stakes at Churchill Downs. Plus horses to watch, best bets, and lots more. So let's break Out of the Gate. We begin Out of the Gate with our horse watch segment. A couple of horse watches won last week. Matt, Barry Lee, Mike Bourbon Currency, Mike Beer, Naira Analyst. You go to Belmont for your horse watch this week.
Yeah, Coppertown, 3-year-old for Todd Pletcher. I don't know about you guys. This is sort of the time of year now that we've seen most of the major 3-year-old races for this crop. I want to start looking for the newer faces. Coppertown's one of those new faces. This is his first start since a layoff. He made his debut early on in the year down at Gulfstream Park. He actually ran well. He didn't win that day. He got run down in the stretch by a horse who took a ton of money in that race and ran to his backing. This is his first start since then. Off of a layoff, stretching out to a 1-turn mile, and this horse just went right to the front. And he buries this field through the stretch. He never really gets down to serious business here, and he wins off for fun. 90 buyer speed figure for this horse, trained by Todd Pletcher. Could be a 3-year-old with a little bit of a future. I know that Pletcher, it might sound weird to say this, he trained the Derby and Belmont winners this year, but this might be one of the better 3-year-olds he has in his barn.
Nice performance for Coppertown, to be sure, on the lead at Belmont. Matt, you have a late developing 3-year-old as well.
Yeah, first-time starter for Horatio De Paz named Go With the Terrain. Again, a 3-year-old. He's a gelding. He got clearly a late start. I don't know if there was any sort of physical issues or whatever it may have been, but he debuted at Laurel most recently, and this is him on the turf going 5.5 furlongs. And he's going to be a little bit goofy out there. You're going to see him swap leads and drift about, but the thing I like the most is he finishes, and this is going to be, unfortunately, one of the last handful of scat daddies that we get to see on the racetrack. But I think this is an interesting run. He got an 86 buyer here. The way that he finished makes me think that there is something here, and I understand it's just maidens and maybe he's beating up on nothing, but the problem I also have is I don't know what you do with him now. It's this time of year. We're in the middle of September. How many more turf sprints are you going to have here on the East Coast? Maybe you try Keeneland, maybe you try Churchill Downs, but Horatio De Paz is more of a mid-Atlantic guy. It'll be interesting to see what we do with this horse.
High percentage connections, versatile pedigree. Perhaps we will see him on dirt as he tries to break through his entry-level allowance condition. I talked about my horse watch a little bit during the Best Bet segment last week. That's It's the Journey. Let's watch his performance in the Chaladon Stakes last week. He is on the outside, and the horse to beat is a Fleet Willie at even money, and It's the Journey is just inhaling him on the outside. Alex Cintron's just going to peek underneath, and from right now, it is all over. It's the Journey is going to win this race, and this is his 4th consecutive victory for Michael Trombetta. This form cycle, 8 starts, 5 wins, 2 seconds, 1/3, 96 buyer effort for It's the Journey in this race, and it appears that this Maryland bred is headed for bigger and better. The Maryland Million sprint race is upcoming at Laurel on October the 4th. I believe that's 100 grander, and It's the Journey might be a horse that's finally getting good. They tried to stretch him out early in his career. This is what he wants to do. 6, 6.5, 7 furlongs. It's the Journey. He's a 4-year-old gelding by Mineshaft, trained by Michael Trombetta. Let's get to some handicapping and the Woodbine Mile. Saturday's DRF.com Formulator Race of the Day is the Grade 1 $800,000 Woodbine Mile. Let's take a peek at this field. It is an international cast. And gentlemen, we've got the 2015 winner in here, the number 8, Mondialiste. Mike Beer, Mondialiste came back to America in 2016, won the Arlington Million, ran really well, I thought, in a paceless Shadwell Turf Mile. But after being stretched out in the Breeders' Cup Turf and not running very well, he has not run well in Europe in 2017.
Yeah, so far his campaign this year has been Mondialiste like, if I can put it that way. I just don't really like any of his races so far this year. We'll see if he can come back to the States, get his Lasix back on, and run one of his better races. Because if he does, this is a field that he could very easily beat. Personally, you know, when I think about the races that he ran over here in 2015, this race, and then he backed it up with an excellent performance in the Breeders' Cup, I really don't think it's gotten any better for him. I know that he came back and won the Arlington Million last year, but I don't think it's gotten any better for this horse since 2015.
Can't the argument for Mondialiste be, Matt, he was never a great European horse anyway, sort of a second and third tier type. But when he got to North America, when he got with Lasix, when he got with competition that wasn't up to snuff with what he was usually facing in those major races over there, then he found himself. Are these sort of poor running lines recently a mirage, and he's going to come back to his good one on Saturday?
Yeah, it could be a little bit if you want to just use sort of an analogy of varsity player playing with the JV players. And I hate to say it like that, but that's kind of what we have over here. Horses that are just a cut or two below the ones over in Europe. I think he just... Woodbine is one of those tracks, especially the turf course, that I feel like it is a horse for course kind of place, where if you really get over that one-turn mile in a good fashion, I think it's going to go a long way, even with a horse like Mondialiste, who maybe he's not in the best form of his career, but I think if you throw him out, you're probably being a little bit unkind, and maybe you're making a mistake.
Two favorites in this race are likely to be DeVille, coming off a somewhat disappointing performance in the Arlington Million, and perhaps North America's, or at least the United States' leading hope in the Woodbine Mile. Mike, that's World Approval.
Yeah, World Approval has been very good this year, especially since they've concentrated on shorter races. Mark Cassidy and his crew, you know, they tried to make him a turf router going longer last year in sort of the marathon division, and he did some good things in that division, but it really feels like he's better going shorter. His most recent race in the 4-Star Dave up at Saratoga, once again turning back out of a 1.25 mile race where they gave him one more crack at the Manhattan. This is him going the mile at Saratoga. Over yielding ground, big rainstorm right before this race. He handles it just fine. I love the way he powers through the final furlong here. I just love the way this horse finishes when they go shorter with him. This is his distance, and I think this is a great spot for him on Saturday.
The question I want to ask both of you is this World Approval simply because of that ground?
I don't think so. I mean, he handles firm, as far as I can tell, handles firm ground just fine.
I don't think he moved up necessarily because of it, but I think it's hard to argue the fact that he ran as well as he did, and it's a career best number on that wet track. I think he's going to be just fine even over the firm going up at Woodbine.
7-2 on the morning line for World Approval. You've got one of the local hopes in here at a big, big price, Matt. And this horse, your top selection in this race, ran so well behind the great Tepin last year in the Woodbine Mile.
I think Tower of Texas is a horse that I know maybe if you just want to say the local hopes, they're not as good as the best horses coming in. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. All he does is go out and run good race after good race, and you brought it up. He ran so well behind Tepin last year. And in his most recent start, I think this was the perfect prep to get to this race here, because at the top of the lane, you're going to see him in the red cap. He's going to know where to go. He's in behind a bunch of horses, and also I know the fractions look like it's a reasonable pace. Timeform has it all color-coded blue, as though there was nothing really going on early. He's going to follow Glenville Gardens right now, and he's just a better horse than Glenville Gardens is. I like the way that he finishes. Conquest Panthera eventually gets the job done there in those familiar pink silks, but I think Tower of Texas has a giant chance in here. Sure, he's going to need a little bit of pace, but he's going to get overlooked. I don't think he's going to beat the 12-1 he's in the morning line. I think you're probably looking at 8 or 9-1, but I think he has a legitimate chance in this race.
I like the way he fired once he got clear to the outside and free of traffic. He is a really interesting long shot in here. That's the number 2, Tower of Texas. I'm not going to judge my top selection, Mike's top selection, World Approval off that 4-Star Dave. It was nice to see him handle soft turf, but that was just a boggy turf course. We talked about it on the Expanded Stakes preview that you could find on video.drf.com or on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, that this horse is just fine on a firm turf course as well, and he's got great tactical speed. I don't think this pace is going to be very fast. John Velasquez will have him in a good spot. I'm going to go with the number 1, World Approval, in the Grade 1 Woodbine Mile. Of course, international appeal on Woodbine Mile Saturday. Every year, Marcus Hirsch from DRF is going to take a deeper dive and take a deeper look at some of these European entrants, not only in the Woodbine Mile, but Hawkbill in the Northern Dancer. And then Nicole Russo's pedigree pick focuses on 2 very important 2-year-old races, graded stakes at Churchill Downs. Let's hit those segments right now.
Hi, it's Marcus Hirsch from the Daily Racing Form, aware of many hats, including this one, but also I'm, along with our Steve Anderson, the co-international correspondent, I'm here to talk about the Woodbine Mile and the Northern Dancer Stakes on Saturday at Woodbine, with a particular focus internationally, as there are several horses that have traveled overseas for these races. Let's start with the Woodbine Mile, which has always attracted some international participants. It's a $1 million race. and the internationals have done well in this race in the past. Aidan O'Brien has sent 2 horses, Joe V and Lancaster Bomber. I think both of those sources are interesting. I'm going to start with Lancaster Bomber, who is almost certainly going to be the longer price of the two, and to me is a potentially playable horse in this race. He's a 3-year-old, been to the U.S. before, finished second to Oscar Performance in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And in that race, as well as in most of his career, he has been considered kind of a more of a pace-making type rather than a horse that runs on his own in big races. But I would say that, I mean, it's not just me. I remember reading that Aidan O'Brien said this as well, that the horse has exceeded expectations. That's starting with the Dewhurst Stakes last October when he was making the pace for Churchill and still held on for a pretty good second. And it was a similar situation in the Juvenile Turf where he was allowed to run from behind that day and finish pretty well for second. I think that he's got has had a pretty solid year, particularly if you consider that this is a horse that wants firmer going. The weather's supposed to be great at Woodbine for the days leading up to and the day of the Woodbine Mile. I think that the horse is going to get the course condition that he likes. His second in the St. James's Palace Stake, around 1 turn, just like the Woodbine Mile, although that race is right-handed rather than left-handed. Second in a firm ground to Barney Roy, who is one of the top 3-year-olds in Europe, and ahead of Thunder Snow, who won the UAE Derby, didn't run the Kentucky Derby, but tried to before he propped right after the start. That's pretty solid form. And then most of all, I mean, I think you really have to look at the weights in this race. This horse is only carrying 112 pounds. He's getting as much as 12 pounds from some of his older rivals, like World Approval. I mean, I don't know how much you believe in weight. I think that it's something worth considering, especially in route races, and especially when it's fairly extreme. 12 pounds with a horse as good as Lancaster Bomber. I assume that his jockey Wayne Lorden was selected because he can do the weight, so that he could take full advantage of that situation. Just looking at Deauville, obviously the more accomplished of those 2 horses and has been more highly regarded, but I don't know that he has significantly better chance at a lower price. If you watched the Arlington Million last time, I thought he was going to win that race. I thought he was the best horse. And he just got a lovely, perfect trip. I mean, he absolutely snatched defeat from the jaws of victory between the 8th pole and the wire. I thought it was a little bit of a disappointing run. They're cutting back to a mile again, as they did earlier this year when he went from a 3rd in the Tattersall's Gold Cup. The form of that race is held up well-decorated night when the Irish Champion Stakes last weekend. He got back to a mile in the Queen Anne while adding blinkers. So what you're looking at is a horse with, some ability. He won the Belmont Derby last summer, which, beat Highland Sky and Beach Patrol. Solid performance. But they're still tinkering and trying to figure out the best trip, the best equipment for this horse. And I think at this point, he kind of is what he is. He's got a chance. I don't love him. I don't know that he's quite good enough. I don't know that he's quite quick enough for a mile. And I would be more inclined to play Lancaster Bomber personally. Let's get to Mondialiste, another European. He won this race 2 years ago. I see nothing to suggest that the 7-year-old is the same horse as he was then. He looked like he had a spark of life in the York Stakes 2 races ago, beating a nose, but then he regressed to the way he's been running, too many times in the last year when he ran back after that race on August 26th at York. He's just not for me at this point in his career. Could Lasix help him? Could firm ground help him? Possibly, but I'm siding with the idea that we're not going to see the same Mondialiste that was such a top-level performer in his races in the States in the past. Arad is now trained by David Simcock after spending, some relatively fruitless time in Australia earlier this year. This is another horse who's been to Woodbine before. He was 5th last year over good ground. A firm course could help him, but again, we're talking about a 6-year-old with exposed form. I can't see a path to victory for him in this race, although he could improve upon his Australian form and finish in the top 3. He has that level of ability at his very best. And finally, we'll go on to the last overseas horse in the race, Dutch Connection. This is a horse that, if you look back through his career, he absolutely loves Goodwood. He's done all of his best running there, and you'll see that his last race, a 2-length win in a lesser Group 3 race, came at Goodwood. Another horse that I feel like is exposed. I know what his limits are. I don't think he's good enough to win the race unless perhaps 3 horses don't run to their form. The 2 O'Briens, and the horse that I think is the most likely winner, the favorite, and arguably the top American miler right now, world approval. This horse was very impressive last time in the 4-star Dave. He loved to cut back from longer distances. Trainer Mark Cassius said that was the key to his performance. You know, when he went a mile and a 16th, his first start of the year, and the Dixie, I think it was also very sharp. I just think he's from a family that has produced great milers in the past, and I think he's found his niche. I think he's going to run back to his last race, and I actually don't think the Euros are going to beat him. But in playing the race, you know, I'll focus on him, and I'll try to get Lancaster Bomber into the mix, hopefully at a fair price. Now, if we look real quickly at the Northern Dancer Stakes, one of the supporting features on a really strong card at Woodbine, we have one international horse, Hawkbill, and he's very, very formidable in this race. I mean, the thought on Hawkbill was that he needed softer ground for his best, but he's run a couple of really good races over firmer turf in his last couple of starts. Top to bottom, he's just a very solid, like lower Group 1, Group 2 level mile-and-a-half horse who, you know, has adapted to different tracks, different countries, different conditions, seems to ship fine. And his last race, he was second in the Grosser Preis von Berlin, one of the biggest older horse races in Germany, and the form of that race took a real step forward when the winner, Deshinga's Secret, came back and won the Prix Foy in a prep for the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe last weekend in France. So Hawkbill, I mean, I just don't see anyone in that race that can challenge him if he runs to form. I expect he will run to form. Probably a win in the Northern Dancer for the Euros. Maybe not so much Woodbine Mile.
Hi guys, Nicole Russo coming to you for Out of the Gate from the Keeneland September yearling sale, which Dan Ellman and I continue to recap for the DRF Breeding Report here on DRF TV. So many people shopping here have the same goal, to find a horse for the Kentucky Derby, and the road to the 2018 Derby officially starts on Saturday, right where it will end next May, under the Twin Spires at Churchill Downs. The Iroquois Stakes is the first points race toward next year's Derby, and the majority of the colts running here will be getting their first distance test after running in sprints all summer. One I feel who's going to relish the added distance is Hollywood Star. Broke had made it on debut here at Churchill despite a troubled break. He just kept grinding on for a half-length win. He then finished second to the really well-regarded Copper Bullet in the Saratoga Special. Coming back to a track he likes Sire and Malibu Moon, who definitely adds some stamina to a horse. He's out of Hollywood Story, a multiple Grade 1 winner routing. Now, she's already the dam of Hooray for Hollywood, stakes placed at a mile, and Miss Hollywood, a full sister to Hollywood Star, a stakes winner at 7 furlongs and stakes placed at a mile. So while I think this is that one that'll definitely go longer, middle distances such as the Iroquois definitely well within his scope. Philly's also facing that distance question Saturday in the Grade 2 Pocahontas, the first points race for the 2018 Kentucky Oaks. And Kelly's Humor, who owns the field's top buyer, has already shown some versatility in her young career. She won her debut at a mile on the lead, then won the Ellis Park debutante at 7 furlongs, rallying from off the pace. She's got champion sprinter Midnight Loot, who we talk about hidden turf sires. I think he's actually a bit of a hidden distance sire. Genetically, the son of Real Quiet, certainly bred to go a distance, built to go a distance, but throat surgery early on in his career precluded that, and he instead found his niche as a late-running sprinter. At the very least, he can get you a middle-distance horse. He's already had some nice horses like a Queen's Plate winner and Midnight Aria. And this one, Distorted Humor, her broodmare sire, certainly is a classic-type broodmare sire to back that up. Take a closer look at these youngsters Saturday at Churchill Downs. two well-matched and interesting races. And we'll be back to talk you through some more action after these messages and Out of the Gate.
You asked, we listened. DRF Plus has more flexible subscription options. Use DRF Plus Basic for exclusive news and analysis, including our DRF Live real-time news feed. Or go deeper with DRF Pro and unlock buyers, closer looks, picks, and reports, including the DRF Daily Game Plan. DRF TV viewers get 50% off the plan of your choice. Use code DRFTV50 at checkout. Learn more about the DRF Plus subscription plans at drf.com/plus.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Let's take a look at the field for the Grade 2 $250,000 Canadian Stakes for fillies and mares going 1 1/8 at Woodbine, carded as race number 8. It kicks off a 20-cent $200,000 guaranteed pick 5. I believe it also kicks off a special pick 5 linking stakes action from Woodbine and the New York Racing Association. For expanded stakes previews of all the graded stakes races this weekend, head on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube page. Matt Chad Brown has LEC's World in this race. LEC's World's a hard-hitting sort. You thought she might have gotten into a little bit of trouble last time out at Saratoga.
Just a little bit at the top of the lane. She didn't have the cleanest to run, and then finally when she was able to be produced, it was a little bit too late. She only lost by 3/4 of a length, and it was about a 4-horse photo, though. So, I mean, I don't want to say that she's just a really main contender in here, but at the same time, I think she was a little bit unlucky most recently. The problem is, even with that race, she's a little bit slow as opposed to the likes of a Cadura.
I think that's a fair point. And Mike, isn't sort of the problem with LEC's World is, well, she's LEC's World. We've seen her several times. She's underperformed at times. I know she has 1 or 2 big figures, but that's kind of in the past. The recent LEC's World we're seeing is going to have to step it up to win the Canadian.
Yeah, it does feel like she's going to have to improve again if she's going to beat this field. I want to give her at least some credit for having shown improved form earlier this year for Chad Brown, but her most recent races, I guess they leave a little something to be desired. The other thing that you have to be concerned about with her is, I doubt she's that great a price in here, and she's one of those horses since she's been over here stateside for Chad Brown. She's got 2 wins, both at Allowance Company, man. She hasn't done that much damage in the stakes races.
The even money favorite on the morning line, and here is a very deserving favorite, Mike. This is a horse you liked last time out, the number 1, Cadura. Let's go back to that race at Saratoga. Tough beat. Sorry you have to relive this, but it is Lady Eli running you down.
I guess it's a tough beat. On the other hand, she did have everything her own way, right up on the lead. If she is ever going to beat a horse like Lady Eli, this was probably going to be the day she was going to do it, right up on the front, controlling the pace. She does everything she can to try and win this race, and she just cannot hold off Lady Eli at the end. But this was a nice performance for Cadura. Feels like she's going to get a nice trip in this race. Feels like she sort of has a pretty big edge over this field as far as her overall form is concerned. To me, when I looked at the race, she runs any one of her last 4 races, she probably wins.
Matt, Cadura's merits on paper, fairly obvious, but you do have a little bit of a knock.
Yeah, it's just you've got a big old gap in the workout tab toward the end of August, and I understand maybe just making too much out of that, but I kind of feel like if she were ready to go for another spot, you could have run her up at Saratoga one more time, and the timing of this race makes things a little bit quick if you're going to wheel her back for a race down at Keeneland. So there's just enough for me, like Mike said, if she runs any one of her past 4 races, she's going to win this race. There's just a part of me that says at 2 or 3 to 5, I'll let her beat me.
Anytime you can knock a favorite, even if it's the smallest handicapping angle, do so and try to find a price. And your selection in this race, she's pretty good. She had a win streak snap last time out. It took the boys at a long distance to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing I don't want to hold against Starship Jubilee. I think the run 2 back is more indicative of her true abilities. And this was at 1 1/4 miles where she ends up dead heating with a Chad Brown entrant. But I have to be honest with it, to me, the most interesting thing about this race, I think she's best going a little bit shorter. If you stop this tape at the 8th pole, she's a winner clear by herself as opposed to dead heating. Luckily, this race on Saturday is going to be running about 1 1/8 miles. You see her, she's on the front right now, and she's just going to get run down, I believe, by Reina de Bateria. They're going to tie here on the front, and I know Suffuse didn't fire for whatever reason it may be, but I think Starship Jubilee getting back to a shorter distance, I think that's going to work for her. It's going to be beneficial. Maybe she's not as good as Kadura, but I think she can offer a little bit of value here.
These connections have done a great job with Starship Jubilee. What a claim, reeling off win after win after win, dead heating in that graded stakes race, good tactical speed. As for me, I'm just going to chalk out in here. Kadura to me, good tactical speed, doesn't need the lead. She was on it last time out. She's just as effective from off the pace. All of her races in North America, either fast enough or just way faster than the horses she's running against. I got to go with Kadura at a short price in the Canadian Stakes. Let's move down to Belmont, perhaps a slightly better race. The Sands Points coming up next. Feature race at Belmont Park on Saturday is the Grade 2 $400,000 Sands Point Stakes for 3-year-old fillies on the turf. Let's take a look at this field. We're going 1 1/8 miles on the inner turf. It's a fairly evenly matched race, and you'll see there is a French bred, the number 8 Vue Fantastique, 7-2 on the morning line. Mike Beer, interesting that this horse as a maiden was competing competitively in Group 1 competition, actually won her maiden against Group Company 2 starts back. The last race, though, not so good. I believe the connection said she didn't care too much for the hot weather. It shouldn't be too hot at Belmont on Saturday, and of course, after this race, she'll likely end up with Chad Brown.
The old hot weather excuse. I love that one. We'll see what happens with this filly. Maybe she also needed Lasix. I feel like when you sort of watch some of her races, especially the way that she just sort of gave it up in the stretch, maybe the Lasix will help her too. Listen, she kept good company. 1 for 7 in France so far, but almost exclusively in Group Company. She did break her maiden against Group 3 competition. And you don't have to worry about distance with her. I mean, she wants every bit of this 9 furlongs, and some of these other horses could be a little dicey going longer. There are things to like about her. It all depends on what kind of price you want to take.
Matt, we always have to consider these European imports in major races like this. How do you rank Vue Fantastique?
The only thing I'll say is, without watching replays of her, if you just look at the page, she's not totally dissimilar to Uni, who's also in this spot. When Chad brought her over here, form-wise was just kind of okay, not bad, but not great. And then she gets over here and she runs a great race in the Belmont Oaks. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw something similar from this filly.
Matt, what happened to La Coronel last time out at Saratoga? She was just cold on the tote board. She was hot in the paddock in the post parade, and she just sort of ran around there. It was a far cry from the La Coronel that we saw last year at 2, and certainly a far cry from what we saw before she went to Royal Ascot.
I don't have a good answer for you. I'm basically just hopeful that it was a matter of this was her first start back from going over to Ascot, a trip that didn't work. Not for her any reason that she did. It was just more a matter of the horses that she was facing that day. Much better as far as class is concerned. I'm going to assume that maybe she just needed one under her belt, get her back to her best form, like we saw in the Appalachian earlier this year, where she just buried this field. And I understand this was months ago, and maybe some of these fillies have developed and moved on. And I suppose it's possible that she hasn't, but you've got some big names in here, most notably Proctor's Ledge, who swept the 3-year-old races up at Saratoga. I think the best version of La Coronel is every bit as good, if not better, than these other fillies. I just don't know if we're going to get it. I'm hopeful, again, just kind of in Mark Cassidy, I trust here, that if she runs her best race, I think she's capable of winning this.
Yeah, good tactical speed, and certainly before heading out to Royal Ascot, where she was far from disgraced, she had to be considered either the leader or the second best 3-year-old filly turf horse in the country, along with New Money Honey. Mike, you're Defiant Honor's biggest fan. You're going back to her. You scored with her last time.
Yeah, it's a couple. This is more of the kind of a race where some of the, maybe bigger names in this field don't really do all that much for me, and I really struggled with this race. And at the end of the day, I just want to give Defiant Honor one more chance here. She steps back up in class here to try another graded stakes race. I know it hasn't worked out for her so far in graded stakes races. If the race 2 starts back, I have plenty of excuses for. Toner claims that she displaced in that race. I also didn't think she got a great trip in that race anyway. They cut her back in distance, and they gave her a little bit of a class drop last time at Saratoga in the risk averse, and I thought that this was a pretty nice rebounding performance from her. First of all, she got a great ride in this race, using her early speed to get forward and to land a perfect pace tracking trip. She takes over at the top of the stretch, and she's much the best from there. I like this performance from her. I think it showed that she deserves one more chance stepping back up in class. And at the end of the day, you start looking at this field on paper, it's not that much speed. I hope Nick Juarez goes to school on this ride she got last time and sends her forward from the gate.
That's a very good point, because in the expanded stakes preview that you can view on video.drf.com or on the Daily Racing Form YouTube page, the Timeform US Pace Projector has Defiant Honor on the lead. And whether she makes the lead or it's second off of James Bond's big long shot in here, it's probably going to be a good trip. She might get the jump on everybody turning into the stretch. I liked Uni when she made her North American debut for Chad Brown in the Belmont Oaks. It was a good 3rd place finish. Great ride from Arad Ortiz that day. Saturday at a distance that I thought was a little bit far from her. And when La Coronel was a little cold on the tote board last time out, well, Uni was the beneficiary. This horse took all the money. And as we see, they swing into the stretch. She's still got a lot of work to do. She's in that pink hat, yellow silk. She's going to have to swing all the way to the outside. Proctor's Ledge, the number 4, just to her inside, is going to get the jump on Uni. But Uni comes with a good, solid late run. This is on good turf course. She has performed well on firm going in the past. The key for Uni is this. She just needs a little bit of pace up front. But what is wrong with you guys? A turf stakes race in New York, and you're not going with Chad Brown? I'm hoping Uni, maybe widest and fastest, to win the Sands Point. JK's play of the day, there's going to be a mammoth pool in the mandatory Super High 5 at Woodbine on Saturday. He's going to attack that play. Craig Milkowski's Timeform US Spotlight, the Locust Grove at Churchill Downs. Let's go to those segments right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to JK's Play of the Day. We're going to go north of the border for this one. We're going to take it up to Woodbine for Woodbine Mile Day. They have a Super High 5 carryover mandatory payout in the last race. It's race 13. So get your handicapping tools ready for a 20-claimer, non-winners of 2. It's a tough division to handicap, but we'll see what we can do here. I'm going to play a series of tickets, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to key 3 horses in first and second place. They're all very likely horses. They're nothing too creative there. But I think the way that we're going to make some money is trying to get a price in maybe second or third place here. So the 3 that we're going to start with is the 2 Rockport Dancer, who was running at this level last time. I've talked about it before on the podcast, and I've talked about it on here as well. I'm a big fan, especially of these claiming levels, of the Timeform race ratings. You have each race will have a number that kind of lets you know what kind of class it's going to take to win the race, and then each horse has kind of a race rating number for each of their performances. So this race rating is a 90. The 2 horse is coming out of a 94, where he was wide in that race and just got beat by a nose. So that suggests that he should run better in this spot. I'm going to use the 4, Katrina's Way, also coming out of the same race with a 94. That horse had a little bit of trouble in the stretch at the top of the lane. You'll notice when you watch the tape back. And then the 5, Prize Bourbon, coming out of a little bit of a different class. It's an optional claimer up at Woodbine, but coming out of a 93. So all 3 of those horses that I'm going to kind of key in this spot are kind of essentially down in class a little bit, although it is the same situation. The race ratings suggest that the race they were in prior was a little bit better than this one. So I'm going to use the 2, 4, and 5 in that first spot. And then when I get over to the second spot, I'm going to add a few more horses in there. I'm going to use the 1, Orphan Queen, who's coming out of a maiden 20 race, which isn't the most encouraging, coming up against horses that have won before when they were facing horses that hadn't won. Nonetheless, got the job done. Did that first off of a claim, and that's one of the things I like to see is a horse kind of progressively moving forward first off of a claim. So I'm going to use the 1 in that second spot a little bit, kind of that secondary key situation. When I show you the ticket, you'll be able to know what I'm talking about there. I'm also going to use the 10, Looking Perfect, coming out of that same race with Rockport Dancer. The thing that I didn't like as much about this horse, the 10, he's drawn outside, going to lose a little bit of ground, and I think the horse will probably get bet down a little bit. So I had to kind of crack some eggs in this situation. He happened to be one that I moved back to kind of that second tier key. And then the 13 is if you wanted to look for one horse to key maybe in every spot, this would be the one that I would kind of look at. It should present a lot of value at 20-1. Here's one of the things that really caught my attention. I heard this old saying a long time ago. In claiming races, you want to look for horses that broke their maiden at the highest level. This horse broke his maiden in an open maiden special weight on the turf, going 7 furlongs. They've been going longer since then. Last year was going 6.5 against better horses. So I think this horse is one that could get a piece at a price. I'm going to, when you look at the ticket here, I'm going to use him in second as well. So we'll flash the ticket for you on the screen, but I'm going to use the 2, 4, and 5 as my main keys in this spot, needing them to run first or second. And then I'm going to use the 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 13 as kind of my secondary keys. Good luck. We'll see you next week.
Hi, this is Craig Milkowski of Timeform US for this week's edition of Out of the Gate. Today we're going to look at the Grade 3 Locust Grove being run Saturday at Churchill Downs for older fillies and mares. It's a route race. And we'll start out looking at the Timeform US preview page. The first thing that jumps out, if you look at the spotlight figures for each horse, is how closely grouped this field looks. The range goes from about 116 down to 104, which isn't much of a spread at all. The other thing that jumps out is the lack of speed here in the race. You can see there's a whole bunch of closers and mid-packs. The only horses who have shown really much early speed at all are Brooklyn's Way and Mo D'Amour. We'll look at the Timeform US pace projector and see what it shows, and unsurprisingly, it shows that the race is going to favor horses on or near the early lead. The horse that does pick on the early lead is the horse that I'm going to go with here today, and that's Brooklyn's Way. Look at her past performances, and there's quite a bit to show here. The first is she was running really well last year. She had a couple 116s to close out the year, including a romping win at Indiana where she blew the field away by 8 lengths as a 4-5 favorite. She hasn't quite got back to that form yet this year, but I think there's a few reasons for it. You can see she returned at Prairie Meadows in a field where she went off the 8-5 favorite. And having actually watched and bet on that race, it was during the Iowa Derby weekend, she would have been much more than 8-5. I think she was kind of dead on the board. I think the connections knew she wasn't ready to give her best shot, and she really didn't do any running at all that day. She returned in Indiana, and she actually retained the same, I believe it was the same race she won last year on Indiana Derby weekend. And she had a really tricky, tough trip. If you look at the fractions in red, she ran in the 150s, which is off the chart for this class, really high, pressing the pace. She lost the 2 horses in here, Tiger Moon and Mo D'Amour again. But like I said, that pace was really quick, and if you believe the pace projector, which I do here today, she's going to have a much easier time on the front end. She still ran a nice 112 speed figure that day, which is strong in this field. Her next out when she went to Ellis Park, in the grade 3 groupie dial, she just had a nightmare trip. She had a bad start, rough pace. It was a hot pace. She was wide, and she just kind of once again lost to Tiger Moth. But I think you can just draw a line through that race. I think the pace advantage she's going to have in here, being up close to what should be a slow pace, is going to make a big difference for her. A couple others in the field. One is the likely favorite, Tiger Moth. She comes in off 2 wins in a row, both beating my selection, actually. But you also notice she's a closer. She likes to come from well off of it, and she's been getting really favorable setups that she's not likely to get today. She keeps getting in races with fast paces, making the most of it, but I really think she's going to be up against it today. Another horse that intrigues me is Blue Prize, the Argentinian horse. She had a decent record, ran a grade 1, won a grade 1 in her home country, Argentina, before shipping to the States. And although she's had a bit of she's getting better and better each time. She's improved. Her time form ratings were 105 when she came here. She worked her way up to a 112. And she's also shown last time out she hadn't shown before since shipping. So I think that's a good sign, and I think she's a strong contender here as well. The last horse we'll talk about is Mo D'Amour. Mo D'Amour is just a real steady horse. She kind of, all her speed figures are always the same, between about 100 and 110. Just depends on the trip. Last time, you can see I have underlined the blue fractions where the pace was a little bit slow and she came from off of it. But she made a run and still kind of faded late. So she's not a horse I love in here, but she is a horse I'll be using in exactas. So again, today my top pick is going to be Brooklyn's Way, and I'm going to play her in exactas with Blue Prize and a little bit with Mo D'Amour, and I'm going to try to beat the favorite Tiger Moth. That's it this week for Timeform US for Out of the Gate. Now back to Dan in the studio.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Time for our Saturday Best Bet segment. Mike Beer, NYRA analyst, you're bringing back an old horse watch as a best bet.
Yeah, Cerise's Prince goes in race 7 on Saturday, Belmont Park, a mile on the Widener turf course. Not the easiest allowance optional claimer field for this horse when you consider he is going to be stepping in with a prior grade 1 winner in Annals of Time, but he catches that horse off a layoff, and maybe this is the spot for Cerise's Prince. We made him a horse to watch a few starts back at Belmont Park, so we'll show that replay again. This is his last win. Just keep in mind, this turf course took a ton of rain. The races were canceled right after this race. That's how wet it was out there. This horse made a very enterprising pace over that course, and then he will grimly hang out at the end of this race, but I think he ran better than it looks. Since then, a stakes try against Disco Partner where he was up there contesting it around to the top of the stretch before he gave it up, and then last time at Saratoga, and that's the race where I think you really want to go back and take a look at it. He had an impossible trip from an outside post wide the entire way, took a big run at it off the turn, and then he got tired in the stretch. In this spot, drawn more towards the inside, I'm hoping he gets forward. Black Tide's a big speed, will probably make the front. He's going to have to sit off that horse. But if he can do that effectively and take over in the stretch, maybe this is a spot for Cerise's Prince to get back in the winner's circle.
Connections have always thought very highly of Cerise's Prince, and you're right. Maybe this is a very good spot. Matt, you're going to Churchill Downs, one of the 2-year-old races that Nicole looked at in her pedigree pick segment.
Yeah, opening weekend, I should say, down at Churchill Downs. You're going to go to the Pocahontas. I like the number 9, Sultry. She's a filly that just most recently broke her maiden for Eddie Keneally down at Ellis Park. We're going to take a look at that run right now. She's going to come from the back of the pack. She's just now angling out into the clear. She's going to change leads, and I just like the way that she finishes. And Dan, you and I talked about it in the stakes preview. She gives off the sort of feeling and the vibe that only distance is going to be beneficial for you. Look at the pedigree. She's supposed to go on forever and a day. I just like the way that she finished in here. And there's also appears to be a lot of speed signed on. I think you take her back, you make one run. Whether it's good enough to win the race or not, we'll find out, but I think she should be a decent enough number in there. I'll go with Sultry.
Yeah, we both like Sultry a little bit. As you say, there's going to be a lot of pace. She is certainly bred to handle the stretch out. It's nice to know at this early stage of her development that she can pass horses, no sweat. I'm going to the Woodbine Mile undercard. Race number 6 is the Bold Venture Stakes. Give me the number 2, Boreal Spirit, 6-1 on the morning line. Gary Boulanger takes them out. Let's go back to this horse's most recent race. Now, this race is on the turf, and the Bold Venture is on synthetic. Eurico Rosa da Silva's riding in this spot, and coming out of the gate, he knew there was not a lot of pace signed on, and he knew that the 2 horses to beat were to the inside. He wanted to be where the 1 was or where the 4 was. He is neither. And he is being shuffled back right now just in a very, very tight spot. And the next thing you know, you turn into the stretch in this 6-furlong race, not a lot of pace, the 2 horses to beat in front of you, and you are last and still in and among horses. What I do like from Boreal Spirit is once he eventually gets clear to the outside, he comes with a good, solid run. He's only going to fall short by a half length. He's going to gallop out well after the fact. Some folks are going to say, well, Boreal Spirit's more of a turf horse. He is 0 for 8 lifetime on synthetic, and he's going to have to deal with synthetic on Saturday. I will counter by saying the last 3 times he's had to race on synthetic, he's had to race against Pink Lloyd, undoubtedly the best sprinter in Canada on a synthetic surface, and 2 back, Boreal Spirit got beat 2 lengths by Pink Lloyd, earning a 97 Buyer's speed figure. I think he's a little bit dirtied up. I think they're favorites in this race like Unbridled Juan, who are completely untrustworthy. Boreal Spirit, the number 2, 6-1 with good tactical speed. That's my best bet. Best of luck when your horses break this weekend out of the gate.